Hi team, welcome to the session. And today we have our special guest, Mr. Aditya Mukherjee. This person doesn't need any introduction. He had a lot of contribution in the society, especially in the information security. And Mr. Addy, I always say Dada, and because that's how I respect my seniors. So Mr. Adri is basically having a 18 plus year of experience in cybersecurity, and he had a great contribution to the information security community. And I'm sure the today podcast, we are going to discuss about something very realistic, which give a great insight to the people who want to make a career and who want to understand what is happening in the SOC. Thank you, Dada. Thank you for taking out the time for this particular session.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
So, Dada, everyone starting their journey with some different roles and all that. Like, if you talk about me, I started journey with IT, then I moved to security. So, is it the same with you? I always ask this question from the aspirants. Like, I always ask this question from the experts who comes to this podcast. Like, how they started the journey? Like, what was the challenge and what was the issues? How you overcome that?
Sure. So early on in my career, I didn't have anything planned out when I was in my school or my college specifically. But somehow what happened is that since my father used to work in the computer department of one of the largest private banks in India at that time, so I had a little inclination towards IT in general, computers, internets. It was fascinating because back in the 1990s, it was something which was new and coming up. And obviously, you could explore and find out new things. So definitely, like a lot of youngsters, I got into gaming. And gaming teaches you one thing is to crack the passwords and key gens and all of it, because you always don't have the money to buy a new CD or a new game. So you have to crack it and find ways to work around it. So I think that was one of the inception areas of how I got in. Later on, one of my friend enrolled in ethical hacking course, and just for the kicks of it, I joined with him, and through that, I realized a lot of things which were being taught, like looking about phishing emails, looking about, um, you know, uh, cracking passwords, etc. Those were things that I was familiar with. So that's when I realized that this is something where probably I have a little bit of experience and it's up to my liking. So this is something that I can definitely explore as a career. Prior to that, I was more interested to look at cloud computing because that was the biggest thing which was coming up. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about hypervisions, enhanced storages, etc.
Hmm.
So started looking into it. And after completing that course, I started giving a few workshops for
Wow.
ethical hacking and information security. So I covered a few IITs, NITs, and a bunch of different colleges and some small and medium enterprises in UP, Delhi, Lucknow, etc. And that's how I got started. And after a few years of running my own entrepreneurship, I went into the corporate world, and it's been a journey since then.
Wow. So those are like normally, it's basically a great journey so far. Started things with CH and all that. So this video is normally also viewed by the lot of freshers and all that. So nowadays you have seen there's a lot of change happen in last 5-10 years. Initially what happened, we used to start with the concept. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like we get the understanding about how DNS, Windows, uh, Linux, and everything works, and then we discuss about the security and pen testing. But if you see today, the new crowd which is coming, new people are coming in this industry, they're directly looking for a shortcut, going through YouTube videos, fuzzing. They like try to learn fuzzing and all that. So what is your message for those people? What is your most important thing they want to understand when they getting into cybersecurity? Because one side we have this news, a lot of people getting placement, but on the other side we have a lot of folks who say, Prab, I don't get any kind of a calls from the companies and all that. I'm blank. So what is your message for them?
I would say today there's two sides to the coin when it is considered for a fresher to get into any domain in IT and specifically into information security. The good side is there's a lot of information, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of automation already available. So you can just plug in into those courses. You can, as you said, watch few YouTube videos, Instagram short, learn from the tweets about what are the different techniques, what tools to use, and you can get started. But at the end of the day, when you're actually working in the trenches, if you're working for an organization or if you want to work as a freelancer, it's very important that you understand the basic principles and the foundations behind how those logics work or how those tools work. Because time and again, you will come in certain situations where the tools might not work, where you might need to tweak a particular script to make it work for that specific environment. So, understanding the foundations, understanding the fundamentals, and how these things are working under the hood is very crucial, because even at the end of the day, if you're a pass out from, let's say, not a list or a B list college, but you have good knowledge, you can answer the questions which are being thrown at you at the interview, you will still have a better shot at making it, rather than someone who has a few certifications, who is from a couple of good programs but doesn't have a very deep understanding of what is happening from a technology perspective.
The excellent point, Dada. Like this is the point I was. I'm sorry, Dada. We have a different vision of this podcast, and I started with something else, and this look more interesting. To be frank, if you allow me, I have to ask one more question from this
Sure.
area, and I'm sure this can be a very important for the listeners also. Now, uh, Dada is basically supposed into the one particular vertical. I think it can be two reasons. One reason is he loves that. He having that passion. Second is basically someone told. So when we see the verticals in cybersecurity, so what is your viewpoint on that? Like, what is the most important parameters a freshers has to consider when they see the this different, diversified field of cybersecurity?
I think that's a very good question, because today there's so many different domains and verticals within InfoSec
Mm.
that one first needs to understand what are the options available to him or her. So, for example, whenever someone reaches out to me who's either a college fresher or he's a fresher who's getting started into jobs, they often have questions like, I hear about pen testing, or I hear about bug bounties, and there's a lot of money to be made in that. So, should I try for it? So, my initial feedback is, first, get the lay of the land. Idiom would be, put your foot in the water to understand what the water's temperature is. There's so many different AI, ML, there's vulnerability management, there's obviously threat hunting, threat intelligence, there's SOC ops, there's cyber forensics, there's audits, there's compliance. There's a multitude of different options which are available within InfoSec. So if you're starting as a fresher, first and foremost, understand what are the different options available to you. It could be through a base level course, which gives you an overview of all the different domains, or you do your own research. That is always going to be the best way possible, because for people like you and me, we have Googled, we have gone to IRC chart channels, we have done read multiple documents, we have understood the basics, and then we tried to find out what is our niche and where we need to go to. So no matter what domain you're starting in, it's very important. Understand the different options by doing your own research or looking at people who have done their research so that they can guide you. Then find out which is the most feasible field for you based on your skill set as well as your liking. Now, I might like to be a cricketer, but that's not my skill set, so I cannot become a cricketer. But what I can still do is I know about cricket, I speak well, so I can be a commentator. So
Excellent.
you have to find a good blend between your skill set and your liking so that it can make a good combination for you.
That's a very important point. The reason of I basically asked this question is, we have a lot of blogs and all that. Everyone is basically targeting this a particular platform with 3% top to 4% top. So they are more influence on pen testing, SOC, and all that. So that's the reason, I asked this question. And I'm sure those who are watching this video, the person who's speaking in front of you, he basically came from a very down to earth platform. Like, for example, he started with IT, then moved to cyber, and there is one opportunity where we had a discussions, and I can sense that what he basically telling, it makes sense. So that's the reason, I want to start this session with this particular perspective. So coming back to the things is, as a CISO, now we're talking about the top down CISO's approach and all that. Now we have a different verticals in cybersecurity. So there is a one organization who has a forensics, SOC, VAPT, governance. So CISO is basically handle that. Then if you work for the product companies, the CISO approach is more about technology and all that. Today, there is a new concept which is happening is SOC, Security Operation Center, or we're talking about MSSP and all that. And there's a lot of buzzword around this threat detection engineering and all that. So how do you see a CISO, okay, handle all these metrics? Because these are more technical in nature. So we say CISO should be strategic in nature. He should be always there to create a value for business. Okay, that's fine. But as a viewpoint from a SOC perspective and all that, how a CISO can see this perspective?
I think today what has happened is because of the number of organizations which are mandated to have a head of infosec or a CISO in their organization because of the regulatory and the compliance requirements across the globe, there is a good blend of different backgrounds from which CISOs are coming in today. Majority we see people who have been in information security for some time. So these are people who would focus on the technical aspects. You have a large chunk of people who are coming from traditional IT domains. So they are more going to be process oriented because, as you rightly said, they might not get into the technical nitty gritties of how certain operations work. And then obviously you have business leaders which are coming into the CISO role because of their vast experience in the organization. So this might be more of a business stakeholder who is looking to manage information security as part of the overall business risk. Now, apart from the technical CISO, who is going to obviously have a very good understanding of what technologies are implemented, how they should be fine tuned, I think the other two's approach is morely to trust the team in what they're doing, ensure that there are guardrails and benchmarks through which he can or she can measure their performance, and also see if, as a business unit, they are meeting the risk criterias and the holistic return on investment that the organization is making towards a infosec practice in the organization. So I think that's how, in my experience, that I've interacted with a lot of different CISOs, that's what their approach is to look at. SOC and a lot of other operational cybersecurity domains are very tactical in nature. So every day there are new threats which are being interacted with for the teams. So they have to continuously learn, they have to continuously improve their detection mechanisms. And that's where the detection engineering and all of these aspects come into. So you need to have a good set of team members at analyst as a senior analyst level who are doing the actual detection work, who are generating new detections and engineering algorithms to detect those threats and then operationalize them. Because only having the detection is half the work, you also need to respond to it.
Exactly.
So I think that's pretty much the overall matrix of how things work at large organizations.
Thanks, Other. Thanks for sharing this viewpoint about this metrics. And I really like one of the metrics we're talking about, perspective of engineering and technical aspects, how you map the things. So with that only, there is a one concern we have here in the company, which is a nightmare for any CISO is data breach. So as a CISO, can you share your viewpoint how to handle the data breach?
I think data breaches are definitely, as you rightly said, a nightmare for any organization because you have to first understand the scope, how it happened, how long has it been happening for, and what are the implications going to be. Specifically looking at the significant number of data breaches which have happened over the past few years, both in India and internationally, it has been significant. Majorly because one, the scale of impact. We see huge amount, actually in millions, people getting impacted with major data breaches across the nation as well as the world. We see that one of the first response actions that the organization needs to understand is for how long that breach has been undetected or the threat actors have been in the environment undetected, because that goes to showcase the efficiency or the lack of it for the organization to proactively monitor their environment. We definitely have a lot of fallout from that, which is the public and the regulatory scrutinies that happen. So there might be public sentiment, there might be regulators coming down on a specific organization because of a data breach, and that might bring in more fines, which will obviously have a business and financial impact as well. There's implications from a consumer trust perspective as well. For
Social
example,
impact also.
yes, absolutely. So if you are, for example, there was an event in India in this year itself where there was a data breach against uh, organization or a portal which was maintaining the pensioners details.
Hmm.
So in those, what happen is any new organization which is getting onboarded with that particular entity will think twice, because if all those details get out, there might be, larger implications, not just for the entity but for the downstream pensioners whose money is stored there as well. And ultimately, one of the things that everybody looks at, even from a infosec perspective, is how timely the response and the remediation efforts are, because that helps you show how mature the organization are. So one thing that we need to understand is today pretty much every big name in the industry has faced a breach, be it any of the front facing public companies or be it government entities across the globe. So breaches and security threats are a part of the operation that we are doing on the world of internet today. The importance is how much you're taking steps to prevent it from happening and how ready you are to act on it once a breach is detected.
So, Dada, like, thanks for this particular response. So, my follow-up question for this is, like, what are the steps? If you go by the certification, we say, okay, confirm the incident and all that. I want to be very upfront with you. Okay, so this is what the follow people say process. As a consultant or the one who dealing with this issues and all this, what are the most common cause of the breach? And second is, what are the first step we always take? Because why I'm asking this question, by this question, a lot of people, those who are making a career in SOC and all that, they also get this question in their interview. I'm sorry for that, but I also have a personal interest behind that, because
Absolutely.
I don't know like which podcast and which content of the podcast is basically creating impact for our freshers. So
Correct.
that is why I asked this question. It's, I'm sure when you also hire a candidate and all that, you need to understand the mindset, psychological behavior, and all that. So, what is the common causes of breach? And as a consultant, anyone L1, L2, L3, whatever. So, how we respond to the first breach, which is we identified in the organization.
Sure. I would say consistently over the years, we have seen majorly the trends to be linked to either social engineering or phishing attacks, which are targeted at employees across the board. There might be spear phishing attempts, which are targeted at the executive level or the senior leadership of the organization, because obviously they have more accesses and privileges across the environment. So having targeted them and getting their credentials is going to be more useful for the attacker. The other events which actually lead to breaches often are weak or stolen credentials that we often see as part of any data breach. So if anybody goes to Have I Been Pawned, they can see the amount of data which is breached and posted on the dark web on pretty much a weekly and a monthly basis. We have also seen a majority of data breaches being occurring from either malware or ransomware attacks, where there are a lot of different techniques that you encrypt the environment using a ransomware attack, and then you also sell the data on the dark web forums to extort more money from the victim. You have even incidents where insider threat plays a role, where there might be disgruntled employees, there might be even contractors, etc. So that actually leads to third parties and supply chain impacts as well, which might be caused by, say, you are doing all of your security measures perfectly, but your data is being stored or processed by another third party entity or a supplier, and they actually do not have as good of a security apparatus at place. So that's going to lead to a potential data breach. And in my personal experience, unpatched vulnerabilities were a thing that we saw a lot in the past in my consulting experiences, and as well as security misconfigurations. So a lot of companies hire external candidates and consultants to implement technologies, and then over time, either the configuration is not maintained up to the best practices or the softwares are not patched accordingly. So those things definitely lead to the major causes of data breaches. And when you talk about, how do you prioritize a response?
Hmm.
I would say first and foremost is your activation of your incident response team as well as your crisis management team.
Okay.
So every organization should have that, which is one, a cross-functional team which has your digital forensic incident responders. You have your IT teams, you have your legal counsel, you have your corporate communications, and you have your impacted business stakeholders. So this gives you a good set of people to start taking decisions and also informing them so that the message gets across the organization as to what are the expected steps to be taken on. So if we talk about what steps an organization should take post activation of your incident response and your crisis management, it would be first to scope and contain the breach. So in information security, whenever we are talking about a security incident, the first and foremost step is to isolate it so that it doesn't spread any further into your environment or your architecture per se. So isolating whatever is your affected systems, your accounts, and wherever the malicious activity has been observed, and then following up with the traditional analysis and assessment. And I guess obviously based on the regulatory requirements, you might be required to notify certain regulatory authorities and also communicate with any affected parties, such as your customers who are getting impacted, or if you're a third party provider and this data breach is impacting your downstream
Hmm.
capabilities and abilities, you need to inform those partners as well.
So this is the, there was one follow up question for this, because as you said about the regulatory and all that. So how the regulatory landscape was changed in this response, like in last 10 years, we have seen the involvement of regulatory in the information security. It was not there like that. Okay, there was a breach, okay, we will settle out. But today we talk about GDPR, 72 hours, India 6 hours. So as a consultant, or as an individual, how do you see, a regulatory landscape for this data breach? How the company will adapt the regulations, parameters and everything when they handle this breach?
I think from a regulatory standpoint, things have got a lot more streamlined in
Hmm.
the past decade or so. So we have seen stricter data protection regulations kicking in, be it your GDPR or your other privacy laws. Even in India, we are looking at one. When we talk about the other steps which have really changed the regulatory landscape is obviously the mandatory breach notification, which you mentioned. We see increased fines and penalties for organizations who are either not putting the due diligence and due care in place, or they're not following up with the breach notification in time and making sure that whatever threat has been detected is actually informed in the public forum as well as the regulatory forums. We also see certain interest from the regulatory standpoint, which focuses on the cross-border data transfers, because that is another big thing that a lot of countries are focusing on. Because even if you implement certain laws within your nation, if the data is not stored there, it's not applicable. So making sure as to what the law talks about as to how you can share the data or store the data outside of your citizens is also an important aspect. Now, speaking about the response from the companies, I think it all goes down to your basic InfoSec practices, such as conducting regular risk assessments so that you are aware of what the vulnerabilities are, what the risks are, you can prioritize them, and then you can work on the remediation plans. Implementation of stronger security measures. So we talk about encryption, we talk about access control, we talk about monitoring, but how well are you actually doing it? And if you have a third party to come in and test it, such as doing external audits and external
VAPT.
assessments. Yes, not just VAPT. So VAPT is obviously there, but you have different engagements where you have different consulting firms come in and they pretty much do a black box or even a white box to test out all of your controls to make sure if an insider threat was supposed to manifest itself, how would it work? What are the different detections and mitigations you have in place? If let's say your name is posted on a dark web forum, and there's a APT which is focusing on taking you down, how would a black box attack showcase that to you as to what are the different ways through which they would try to get in your organization and exfil the data or implement ransomware or malware?
Thanks, Ada. Thanks for the amazing response on that particular question. So, security, when we say, but when it comes to data breach and all that, India is always on the lowest side. We have very few data breach stories and all that. It means we have a strong team or we have a strong defense center, right? Like,
Well, 2024 hasn't been very lucky for us. So we had a few events.
mm.
Even in 2023, we had a few. But yes, the scale at which we see a lot of different Western countries, I think comparatively it's a little less.
And trust factor is also play the important role. How you basically build the viewpoint about the breach to the market. PR and all that. That also play important role. So, what is your viewpoint on that?
I think there are two things. One is the amount of data breaches that might be happening in India and which are getting reported as per the regulatory or as per the media is concerned. I think it has improved over the years,
Mm.
but there is still a huge gap which has to be improved.
Okay.
So I think that's one underreporting which might be causing less number of data breaches. Two,
Mm.
I think overall organizations from the Western world are more global in nature, because of which, if they are being breached, the impact is far reaching across the globe. Because, for example, if you see Meta or any other service like that getting breached, their users are across the globe. Whereas if you see the recent data breach that we had in India for a consumer facing company which makes a lot of speakers, etc., so their impact was largely focused only in India because they do not have a very large global footprint. So I think that also makes a difference from an attacker's perspective as to which are the lucrative targets that they want to go after. And I think overall, Indian companies have been doing a good job, I would say, not comparing with anyone else. But since we have a lot of consulting firms
Yeah.
which work closely with our startup ecosystem as well, so there's a lot of, I would say, benefit that they get from that, either from a talent perspective or a technology implementation perspective, which probably helps them do a better job comparative to some of the other countries.
Thanks, Dada. So, Dada, the weakest link in the organization is always the people. And if you see the 60 to 70% of the attacks is basically initiated through the phishing or this social engineering and all that. So, what is the role does employee training awareness play in preventing this breach? And what is your viewpoint? What is your recommendation to the listeners who are expert, who are experienced, and they are also handling their environment and all that? So, how we can improve the awareness training and what is the importance of awareness training?
So I would say, obviously, we have all heard that people are the weakest link, but they can also be one of the strongest link in the chain.
Hmm.
The reason for that is because if you have a good set of people who are trained in information security awareness
Hmm.
and what the latest threats are, they can easily identify suspicious activity. They can report on anomalies that they observe either as a practice or as a one-off. They can report on phishing attempts, which might not be caught by your traditional filtering and detection mechanisms in the organization, or different social engineering tactics can also be captured through that. Now, it also helps in reducing human errors, because if traditionally we see companies where a lot of manual input is being done by either customer service reps or different analysts, there's an amount of human error which plays a part in producing or manifesting threat in an organization. So that gets reduced. You have more adherence towards the regulatory and the compliance requirements that might be crucial to a cultural shift for the organization towards security.
Hmm.
I would say largely best practices would be to conduct regular interactive training sessions, because if you're just posting a presentation or just giving a video and asking them to complete, we all know we just click the next button and close it as fast as possible. So making sure that you have some kind of interactive session and you're able to measure how much the listener is retaining your knowledge is going to be a helpful benchmark to know if your workforce is actually cyber secure and cyber aware. Phishing stimulations, pretty much every organization which has a security function does that. So that helps you build and identify the people who are susceptible to phishing attacks, and you can actually focus on training them better. There are different data handling and privacy trainings which have come up as well, and those would help understanding the encryption protocols, how you should share information, make people aware about shadow IT, etc., because those also play a big part when it comes to setting up infrastructures in the cloud, which is
Hmm.
outside of the traditional IT, which might not be under the supervision of the security team or being monitored by the security team. So, making sure your developers and your testers are all aware of how Shadow IT works and all these things work is definitely going to be very helpful. And I think also making sure that you're training your workforce on emerging threats, because today we see AI, ML, we
Yeah.
see a lot of voice cloning happening, telephone calls which are impersonating a CEO or a boss and calling someone up. So these things are only going to increase as these AI ML engines become more mainstream and accessible to people, and making sure that your workforce is actually trained on the emerging threats so that they understand about ransomware attacks, business email compromise, insider threats. I think it'll make them more aware as a person, which will ultimately make your organization safer.
And that is the reason, Anna, I was about to ask that question, and glad you have include that part in your awareness about importance of AI and ML training and deepfake videos. Because still now, I have seen very few enterprises are moving on this AI deepfake videos. They're just talking about again phishing links, OTP, and all that. But I think things are going now beyond the attack vectors, where they're talking about AI, ML, then deepfake videos, then voice cloning. I think these are the new modern way of attack we have, which we have to train our employees on that. So the
Absolutely.
so Dada, thank you. Dada, this is the actually summary, So I want to understand one important point. What is the lesson that you learn from this industry, cybersecurity industry, and what is the viewpoint you want to share with the people?
I would say, looking at my past experience personally, early on in the career, I had responded to many incidents at major client locations where these attacks could have been prevented with basic protective and proactive detections, timely actions on threat intelligence, and decent vulnerability management programs. So, when you look at small and medium scale enterprises, a lot of threats that are faced by them are going to be remediated if you do the basic sanity due care due diligence that we talk about. So if you follow any security standard, these things are going to be taken care of. My recommendation would be to make sure that you have deployed some kind of enhanced monitoring tools, which are basically EDRs, etc., which are looking at real time alerts and creating visibility of what your network activity is, what your user behavior is, and what your system anomalies are, so that you can dedicate a set of people to look at that and respond to that, which are the most meaningful alerts which are being generated. Then obviously get some kind of automation in place which looks at your continuous monitoring. So
Hmm.
making sure you have all your security logs, your audit controls, your vulnerability scans, everything is automated, taken care of, and you don't have to spend every day time looking at those things, which can be automated and are not a high priority compared to the first one.
Thanks, Dada.
The
Hmm.
couple of more points I have.
Yeah.
So another thing is the integration of threat intelligence. So we all recall what happened during WannaCry, and I
Hmm.
talk about this because I recently spoke about WannaCry in a different engagement, and we knew that the SMB vulnerability came out a few months ago. We had the notifications. We knew about how the vulnerability can actually impact. However, very less number of organizations actually focused on patching it because of which we saw such a widespread attack. Similarly, we had SolarWinds, we have a lot of different attacks we have seen where one vulnerability or one 0 day is impacting a huge number of organizations. So making sure you have a good integrated threat intelligence into your security operations, so that whatever threat intelligence you're getting or your vulnerability feeds that you're getting is actually getting operationalized, so you're on top of the emerging threats and attacks. And lastly would be conducting regular security assessments, as I was mentioning earlier, having some kind of external engagement with a security firm which can come in and identify weaknesses in your overall security apparatus will help proactively address any potential risks or weaknesses that you have.
So, Dada, like, sorry for that. So, the reason was I was asking about this one question on continuation of the topic. So, when you're talking about verifying the vendors who can do the assessment for the companies and all that, so do you have any kind of recommendations, when we onboard any vendor for assessing any, we are onboarding a vendor for this assessment and all that. So, what are the 2 or 3 points we should consider instead of having a shallow checklist of 10 controls or 20 controls?
Right. So, since we speak with respect to the Indian aspect, definitely looking that they are cert impaneled.
Hmm.
Second, making sure that from a security perspective, they have done a number of audits, and you can actually call out for different reference checks,
Hmm.
or you can reach out to your peers in the industry and get some reference on what kind of audits they did or what kind of assessment they did, how helpful it was, so that you can benchmark them against the different competitions in the market. So that's two. I think three would also be to check for the skill set of what the empaneled analyst and testers they'll bring in your team for doing the assessment. So getting some kind of background on their skill set, having engagement with them to understand what is the process that they are following, what are the best practices they are following, and that could give you a good idea of what kind of team is coming in, how proactive they are, and how proficient they are in their security assessment.
And but if I remove for a second certain impanel from India specific, and we have a lot of requirement where things are global and all that. So in that case, do you consider validating the technical capabilities or some POCs and all that? Like,
Absolutely. I think you can definitely recommend for having a POC in your environment to see. But I think when we talk about security assessments, POCs don't play a role, because unless you're implementing a tool, that is where the POC part is going to come into play. When you're doing a assessment with the external party, I think it's important to know what their skill sets are, what their experiences is, and how their reportings are, and what the past experiences from other companies who have worked with them, which will give you a good idea of what they're going to bring to the table.
that's great. Dada, it's a great insight. I got in last 40 minutes, and I'm sure this podcast is going to have a super hit because of three major reasons. I like three major points in this particular podcast, and that is a learning for me. I'm going to take from this podcast. One is basically about how to handle the data breach. It's a very good thing that you have shared. Second is regulatory aspects, and third is the last point which you said about the vendor management and all that. And thanks for that, Dada. And I'm sure when I'm making a minutes of meeting, I will going to update this in the video description also.
Sure.
Dada, actually, no, normally we always say on gunpoint, okay, our wish and demand. So for me, the gunpoint is recording. So we are live right now. Let's say example. So are you open for another podcast where, the freshers want to know more about cybersecurity, information security? Are you open for can I share your LinkedIn profile in the description box? So if someone has a query, can they reach out to you? Because a lot
Sure.
of people are there who want our right advice from the right mentor. So are you open for that?
Sure. Absolutely.
Thanks, Ada. Thank you so much. Saturday, Sunday is always critical, but taking on the time on weekend for this noble cause, I truly appreciate and really mean it. And it is your wisdom, your thoughts only, which basically make you different from others. And that is the reason, I was requesting if we get you in this particular podcast.
Sure. I would say I was looking forward to collaborate with you in any way possible. So I'm happy to be here and happy to be speaking with you.
Thank you, Dada. Thank you so much for this particular amazing podcast.